How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the first of a while since we've done a couple of live streams, but that's because we now are seemingly back at war. The United States and Iran exchanging sets of rounds of strikes, escalations in the Strait of Hormuz, and strikes across parts of Iran, and then strikes across Bahrain, Kuwait. The Iranians doing very much what they said that they would do, following through, whilst Trump says the ceasefire is over, but then sort of, well, we might continue to still talk with them anyway, although it doesn't seem like there's a point to do that. Anyway, the guy contradicts himself within the same sentence. Just look at what happened at the NATO summit. But someone who knows a hell of a load about this and who we are delighted to have back on the show is Colonel Daniel Davies of the Daniel Davies Deep Dive. Daniel, it's good to see you.
Always great to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. I mean, we always sort of meet when things just seem to shit show.
Probably falling apart.
Yep. So what the hell is going on now? Can you make sense?
Man, gosh, if I had that, I'd be a rich man because of it. I think that the reality is that nobody knows, and I'm primarily talking about Donald Trump, has no idea what's going on, what he wants to do. I mean, he doesn't even know what he wants to accomplish. And as you just said, I mean, it depends on what time of the day you're talking to him. Maybe even within the context of a single sentence, he seems to say one thing and then contradict it with something else. So everybody is left to figure out, what are we even trying to do? And what do you mean by, as he put out on True Social this morning, that the ceasefire is over, but there's going to be talks? Well, what are you going to be talking about? If the ceasefire is over, then you've gone back to combat. And if you haven't gone back to combat and you're talking, then why did you go back to combat? And what does that even mean? Because we've had these series of tit for tat strikes. Iran will do something with some ships in the Gulf. We'll hit a bunch of targets in Iran. They'll strike back and hit us. Then we had another round of that here just a couple of days ago. Towards what end? What do we think we're trying to accomplish with this? Because look, paragraph number 5 of the Memorandum of Understanding definitely said that the Iranian side would determine how the strait would be opened up from their side. We would reduce remove our blockade, and the Iranian side would decide over a period of about 30 days how the strait would be opened up with no charge of any fees, only for 60 days. It specifically said that in there. Well, now President Trump, after having physically signed that in the Versailles Palace, now then all of a sudden he's like, well, no, we want to have control over the southern part of this. So we're going to have our own little Omani corridor, and we're going to decide who goes through that, even though that's not in the MOU. It doesn't say anything about us having any responsibility, control, or anything otherwise, but that's what we want. So we set up this southern corridor in violation of the MOU. And then when Iran said, that's our deal, that's what we have the authority for that. And if you don't follow this, here's the rules. Here's what you have to do. You could follow and get through, and at least on paper that they would not charge any fees until day number 61. But we said, no, we'll send them down through here on our terms. And Iran said, if you do, we're going to fire on you. And as best I understand, there was about 2 days worth of warnings, and we continued to send ships down through there. And then they finally did what they said and struck it. And so now, of course, we're saying, oh, well, there's nothing in the MOU about you having the ability to fire on ships that go through the southern part. So you violated the ceasefire. And so now here we're going to have these strikes going back and forth. Well, look, that makes me, the United States, look tough. It's like, says, yeah, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Okay, you can. We have the ability. We have the missiles. We have the warships, the airplanes, all that kind of stuff. And we can blow all kinds of stuff up. But what is that going to do? Is that going to compel Iran to fully open up the Strait of Hormuz now, according to our terms, in violation of the terms we got them to agree to after this long period from April where we tried to get the MOU? I mean, all that can logically do, all it can rationally do is what it has done, which is to make Iran say, there's no deal here at all. There's nothing to even talk about because you have now reneged on this point about paragraph number 5, and you've reneged on the one about releasing energy sanctions on us. Now you've gone back on that too. You still haven't released the frozen funds, which we also said was a necessity to start the process. The Iranian side said unequivocally, listen, you have no trust with us whatsoever because of everything that's happened. You can go back to 2018 all the way up through this current war here. So you have no credibility. You can build it up, though, by showing ahead of time sanctions relief and release of frozen funds. And now we can go on to subsequent things here. Well, now we did the sanctions right away. Now we've gone back on that, and we haven't gone through on the sanction, the frozen funds release. So to the Iranian side, what possible motivation do they have to negotiate anything when we haven't even fulfilled those, and we took back one that we did temporarily fulfill? So what we are doing so far, Pyotr, is that we are undermining our own situation, and we are giving the Iranians every motivation to do the opposite of what we want, which is to close back or keep constrained and possibly even close back again the Strait of Hormuz, which will undermine our economic conditions and put at great risk, potentially causing, number one, us to use the last of our strategic petroleum reserves, start getting into our military stockpiles, or to see the price of oil continue to rise back again because there's insufficient supply on the global demand. And now then there's other things that the Iranian side may do, to include potentially closing the Strait of the Bab el-Mandab Strait in the Red Sea. And they, according to Far's news agency a couple of days ago, they may say, and you know what, we may get out of the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we may review our nuclear strategies, i.e. implying that they may go to a nuclear bomb, the thing that we wanted to prevent. All of that negative outcome is because we're trying to change the terms of the MOU and show how tough we are with missiles. And now that we're in a worse condition than we were on June 17th when we signed the MOU. Other than that, things are going great.
All right. Well, there you go, guys. I think the Colonel has answered every question that I think I had in that incredibly expansive. That's just the first question. I don't really know what to know. I mean, look, there was a great piece in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago, which I think cuts the heart of also what you've been saying of why this is such a mess. The MOU has one specific point in it, which you've just very articulately outlined and alluded to. And the United States just doesn't seem to have, the Trump administration just doesn't seem to have a coherent strategy and mindset around the Strait of Hormuz. What is supposed to happen with it? What is the balance of power over it? What is the ownership? What is the direction? Who are the stakeholders? All of that completely non-existent. And so now we just seem like the ceasefire is crumbling, if not largely just completely collapsed. But what I find interesting, and it also goes to what you said, Daniel, and so I'm kind of curious how you see this as a military man. Sort of, Trump seems to like doing, excuse me, coercion in tandem with diplomacy. The two happen simultaneously. So whilst the US is striking, it then pauses to avoid escalation whilst negotiators meet behind the scenes, right? Vis-a-vis Oman in the past or with Pakistan now. Like, what does that tell you? Does that explain that the Trump administration really is trying to keep this restrained, or it's just we shouldn't read?
Yeah, there is a valid concept that says you do in tandem military stuff and diplomacy stuff. If you have a coherent strategy and that I know what I want to accomplish, it's X. And so I've got some tools to do. I've got some diplomatic, economic, and military tools, and I'm going to use them in tandem until I can finally coerce to finally get the outcome that I'm looking for, so that we have an end state that is better for me than the one I started. That is perfectly valid. But what is invalid is when you don't have a strategy, you don't even know for sure what you want to accomplish. And then instead of using these tools in an intelligent and coherent way, you're just having these tools and I'm going to throw this out and see what happens. I'm going to throw this out and see what happens. And you have no idea, nor do you realize, and I'm talking now about the current administration, and because they don't have that kind of coherent thought process, they're throwing stuff out that is contradictory to having any kind of possible solution, because we're making it nearly impossible for Iran to have a negotiated outcome of a type that we may want, which is an open and unencumbered Strait of Hormuz, which is important to point out, was already open and unencumbered before we foolishly chose to start a war. Let's never forget that. But now we're trying to go back and undo the disaster we've had, and we're doing more disaster. So if you want to use military force to get to a good diplomatic end, that is theoretically possible if it's done like with a surgeon's scalpel, as opposed to just somebody grabbing it and throwing it on the wall and seeing what happens, which is what we're doing now. Because why would the Iranian side capitulate to anything when you just took back one of the two things that they absolutely had to have at the first, and then you haven't done anything on the really what was in paragraph 1, which was in Lebanon, then the Iranian side has said Israel has to withdraw from Lebanon, not just a ceasefire, but they have to withdraw, or there won't even be negotiations on what Trump has always said is his primary thing of no nuclear weapons program. Iran is willing still, ironically, to engage in those kind of discussions, but only after these other things have done. And that's not surprising because they've never had a nuclear weapons program. And even though they're threatening that they may now start, they haven't so far. So if they get what they're looking for, there is still a negotiated path to get an open Strait of Hormuz. It's never going to be without fees. I think that that's a foregone conclusion, but it can be open, and people will be willing to pay it if it's a nominal thing. And the Iranians apparently are aware of that, and they are saying it's going to be something that's nominal in comparison, but it's going to be under their control because they want control over it. We can have that, but only if we do good on the things that we want. President Trump, though, is in a trap, and it's not just the Israeli side, and we can talk about that, but it's of his own making, because he cannot fathom any kind of an outcome that doesn't make me look good, that doesn't make me look strong, that I'm the winner, I'm the one calling the shots, I'm telling them what to do. Because what I just described is him conceding to things on the Iranian side, the things that they want. And you can try to put lipstick on that pig, but it's not going to go very far, even among his supporters. But it is necessary and it is possible. And if he was wise, he could say, all right, this was a disaster. I should never have listened to the Jack Keanes, the Keith Kellogg's, Lindsey Graham's, all these kinds of guys, definitely not Benjamin Netanyahu. That was a mistake, so I'm going to fix that right now. He'll take a lot of heat from it politically and domestically, but then he'll move on to whatever's next. And if he can start doing other things that are helpful, people are going to forget about that by November, or at least it'll be a lot less important. That's what he would do if he was wise. But what he is doing is now he's not doing any of that because he wants to make it sound like I'm calling the shots. I think one of his speeches that are in interviews he did on Air Force One yesterday was, oh, no, I mean, we could go back to full-scale war, and it wouldn't even take long. I could win this in a minute, no problem. But, I'd rather do it diplomatically. But he can't do it. He can't do it diplomatically unless he does what I said, and he can't do it militarily no matter what, because we don't have the wherewithal to do it. All of our assets, as big as they are not sufficient for this military task. You cannot make them submit, or we would already have done it.
No, certainly. It's just, I think, a demonstration of the lack of, again, coherency. The Trump administration's flip-flopping on so many issues, but seemingly it's not like this happens on a weekly basis. The time frame is so immediate. Right when Trump is at NATO, talking about all sorts of things with Erdogan, we have to remember the role Turkey has in all of this as a NATO member. It's quite complicated if that gets drawn in as well. There's concerns about Turkish and Israeli tensions as well, potentially even conflict, although I think that's unlikely in the short to medium term. But sort of like, then where do we go from here? Like, what we don't seem to be having as bigger strikes today. Yesterday, Wednesday were more intense. So is it just periodical? We'll wake up and they'll be renewed in heightened flare-ups, as I call them. Like we saw a couple of months back, there was that significant exchange of fire across the Strait of Hormuz, where the Iranians claimed that they targeted a US boat, and then the Americans said we had nothing to do, we had no idea, it was complete nonsense. Is that where we are now? Just periodical seismic flare-ups?
Well, that where we are right now is no progress being made, because the Iranian side, even with these series of strikes that have been happening, I think since the 7th of July here, they haven't slowed down on anything. They have continued to keep their side of the Strait of Hormuz open and their waters, the northern corridor. They've continued to keep the southern side stopped. So no matter how many targets that we've hit, whether it was 80 on one and 100 on the other day or whatever, that hasn't changed anything in the strait. So still, and I hadn't seen today's numbers, but when I saw early this morning from yesterday's number, a single ship was able to be monitored going through the southern corridor through the Omani waters. That's it. But I think like 20 or something went through the northern, which is still a small trickle compared to what it used to be. But at least it's something. But it's only according to the Iranian side's dictates. So long as we keep the sanctions off, so long as we don't release the frozen funds, and so long as Israel stays in Lebanon, the status quo is going to be maintained. Iran will continue to allow people to go through who are following their rules in the north, and they're going to continue to block anything that goes through in the south. and unless we change our ways. So right now we're at a stalemate, and it's more like a standoff, maybe is a better way to put it, because Iran is saying, yeah, I'm not going to budge on anything. I don't care what you've done. And every time you hit me, I'm going to hit you back. So if you want to keep going down that path, we will. And if you want to escalate and do something, and this is the craziest thing I've heard all day, Karg Island, apparently that's back into play in the minds of some. Wes Clark yesterday on Newsmax said, I think we should do that. We should go and take that and hold it hostage, was the term he used. President Trump himself signaled a day before that yeah, we may do something with Karg, somehow magically thinking that matters militarily towards keeping the Strait open. It doesn't. All it would do is cause a great deal of casualties, and I think there are many on the Iranian side that hope he does, because it would be it would be like a shooting fish in a barrel for the Iranian side. They would obliterate us. We would not have any chance to succeed, and there's nothing to gain by holding the thing anyway. So I hope we don't do that. But it just shows the desperation we're thinking. Or President Trump said, maybe we'll expand and we'll start hitting desalination plants. We'll go after other cities. We'll hit their oil infrastructure, et cetera. And Iran is going, okay, what we'll do if we do that? We're going to hit all these other things, and it's going to cause catastrophic and long-term damage to the global economy. So they seem to be saying we're willing to do all of that because we can provide for ourselves, even if we have to, have significant harm done to our economy, but we still have self-sufficiency in food. We have self-sufficiency in petroleum requirements for our own country. We can live this way, and we can get things that we need on the land corridors, et cetera. So Iran can endure this. We can't. And that doesn't seem to have gotten through our mind yet.
No, I remember also why I enjoy speaking with you is because you have all these great anecdotes, or sort of the lipstick on the pig, or the other one you just used. Great sorts of analogies there, Daniel. But yeah, certainly we actually had Wesley Clark on the show a couple of months ago, and we sort of split the conversation between NATO and Ukraine and Iran and the US. And at the time, I have to be honest, I was quite shocked by the general's perspective. I thought he'd be a lot more opposed to what Trump was doing, but he seems to have completely pivoted to hawkish. Karg Island is a good idea, which I think it couldn't be more of a disaster or worse idea for the long-term quagmire that it would inevitably become. I'm surprised that we haven't heard the idea of the Kurds being armed again or something like that. But what's interesting, Daniel, is also that I've noted some points that the Abraham Lincoln is sailing towards the Gulf of Oman. Crews have been preparing for potential strikes. So do you think we could actually see just a return to a full sort of even larger scale, multi-pronged aerial campaign from the United States? They just think, screw it, let's just give a go back what we did in March.
We shouldn't, but given the fact that the Abraham Lincoln is steaming back in that direction, and a lot of the other power stayed and was not redeployed, although there were some prepare to redeploy orders given about 10 days ago, as I understand, but they have not been executed yet. And now it sounds like some are heading back in there. And I can just tell you that it's from militarily, it's true insanity to think that what we didn't accomplish with all of the firepower we had in the first 40 days is somehow going to succeed a second time, because the reasons it didn't succeed the first time are fundamental. You can't use JASSM long-range cruise missiles and Tomahawk cruise missiles to penetrate granite mountains. And that we proved that so many times. There were so many ships that plants that we hit, some of these underground facilities, and all we did is just blow up a few rocks on the top of the mountain, but we didn't do anything to the under the surface. Even when we hit some of the exit doors, which some of these missiles are using for, whether it's a mobile launcher to come out and launch and go back in, or some of the silos that literally come out of the side of the mountain, we have all of that stuff, but they can repair that sometimes within hours. And you can't do anything to the facilities inside at all. So most of these are designed to withstand a nuclear blast. So even if we got insane, really insane, even that wouldn't stop them, and they would have the ability. So militarily, it's an unattainable objective to try and bring them to heel. So if you go back and try this again, we'll only further diminish our stockpiles of all of these, both offensive and defensive weapon systems. Will further degrade, possibly even run out, and we won't have any more effect than we did the first time. So God help us if we do. And if somebody thinks that this is sending the Abraham Lincoln back is going to make the Iranians go, oh, I didn't see that, well, we better do something. I mean, that's fantasy, because they're definitely not going to do it.
No, but then what is the point of all of this discussion around returning to try to have some embedded campaign with the Iranians, right? There's this argument that sort of, if enough assets are given over enough duration, you know, the United States can work with its respective allies and partners to sort of somehow burn out the Iranian mindset. But clearly, as the gathering, shall we call them, with Khamenei, right? The guy had a lot of support. Now, of course, they probably embellished the state media and stuff like that, overdoing it. But clearly, this idea of the entire Iranians being opposed to their government, not really. I think they're just opposed to the corruption and certain frustrations that they have, like any population does. But I don't think they are all for regime change, right? So the entire precedent that the US was trying to base this on is just not going to work. And therefore,
it's not. And then, you know, whatever the actual numbers were, I mean, you can assume that they embellished the numbers to some degree. But man, just looking at the videos, there's not a lot of embellishment needed, because there was massive crowds in every city where they went to, and that wasn't fake. That wasn't fake news. They were physically there. So whatever the actual numbers were, they were huge, and especially in terms of the support for the country. I've talked to a number of people who were on the ground during some of these things, and we can see it, you know, even aside from that, it has really galvanized the people of Iran, because they view the assassination of their leader, whom they had problems with, many of them before this done. He was held in kind of low esteem by many before we assassinated him and turned him into a martyr. And now he's a symbol of the nation. And the attack by us against him is like an attack against them. And they now take it personally. And that's why there was so much demand for revenge against President Trump for the assassination. Obviously not the first time Trump assassinated somebody that was popular in Iran, Qasem Soleimani in 2020. They remember all of it. And I don't think it's a complete empty threat that his life, President Trump's, could be in danger, because there's certainly many that want to get their revenge or so. But aside from that issue, the bigger issue is that it's galvanized them against their government in terms of making concessions. They're saying, do not make any concessions. You shouldn't have even signed the MOU, but you sure shouldn't go back now and submit to anything President Trump said. So the people are now putting their government in a bind and limiting their ability to have a negotiated settlement on anything other than the terms that they want. So in that regard, we have harmed ourselves even more by this arrogant presumption that we can just kill our way to victory. We can't.
No, we can't. And it's just going to go round and round in circles. And I just can't imagine trying to cover it all again, like I did in March, April, May. Like, you were so busy, everybody who was trying to keep track of all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, where do you think we are going to go from here realistically? Where shouldn't we go, but where realistically are we going to, I think, anyway?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we certainly, I laid out where we should go, but where we are going to go, it's hard for me to imagine, and I want to, that President Trump is going to finally wake up. When he signed the MOU, I thought he did, because he himself said, you know, we could have been going into a depression if the Strait stayed closed, and our strategic petroleum reserve was down to about a 4-week supply of what we could use left. And so, oh yeah, we have to do this. So I thought, all right, will the reality finally seep through? And now that seems to have evaporated. And I don't think you can reduce the possibility or dismiss it that he may be in genuine cognitive decline, and that he's not able to make a rational decision, because this is not rational. And I don't know what else may be going on, but it's irrational what he's doing. And so that means every bad thing is possible. So it's nearly impossible to say where it can go other than someplace bad.
And I guess quick takes from you as we close out this session, Daniel, is simply, there was one thing I read, which, I mean, maybe we don't need to answer it because it's in the explanation, if that may, or outline, but Israel shared intelligence with the US that Tehran was devising a new plan to assassinate Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, look, you don't need it. Number one, because Israel said it, I automatically am skeptical that it's true, because I think they're trying to manipulate Trump again, and they've done that. And I had seen that it was not validated independently by American media or American intelligence, which was a second red flag. But look, you don't even need to have any intelligence. Just look at the imagery coming out of Iran when all these banners, and there's a bunch of them, and all these red flags, which meant they want revenge, and directly saying target Trump and all this kind of stuff. That's legitimate, because that is the potential consequence of our actions already. When you assassinate somebody, and Benjamin Netanyahu bragged in a speech to some of his military folks that they had assassinated 20 senior leaders, civilians, and of course he didn't mention it, but they also assassinated many of their family members in the process, sending missiles into apartment complexes. Obviously the supreme leader's granddaughter, the wife of the new supreme leader, and other family members. We keep killing all these people, and we always think that nothing's ever going to happen to us. We have a carte blanche. We have lost any kind of morality, and we now think that we are also above human reaction, that somebody's going to want to do and may someday do something to us. So I hope it doesn't happen. We need to be very vigilant against it, but damn, how about being a little bit smart about stuff and stop just assassinating people because you don't like them, and thinking that the other side is not going to react the way that normal people would. I think it's a big problem.
No, it is a big problem, but we'll just have to have you back to dissect it further, won't we, Colonel? Thank you so much for your time, everyone, for watching. If you enjoyed it, of course, then do subscribe to myself and Daniel at the Deep Dive with Colonel Daniel Davis, and we'll see you all in a future update of what seems to be a return to war. But anyway, have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks for having